Perkin Elmer has always been extremely proactive in relationship to children. We support through our corporate contributions program a number of child-related organizations that advocate for children and children's rights.
And so we have key scientists at all of those locations, and the idea was to allow them to have an opportunity to come together every once in a while, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, to coordinate their research activities.
Hello and welcome to In Focus. I'm Carol Blazinski. In this edition, we'll cover a humanitarian effort in the former Yugoslavia. We'll look in on the activities of Perkin Elmer's Research Council and also our corporate identity program. And finally, we'll pay a visit to a brand new Perkin Elmer family. In the last In Focus, we briefly mentioned Perkin Elmer's participation in the identification of the remains of Croatian war victims. AmeriCares, a publicly funded nonprofit relief organization, asked us to donate equipment and technical expertise. Mitch Kennedy from our Applied Biosystems division talked about some of the problems the team faced.
Typical means for forensic pathologists to identify a body might be dental records, or if an individual had a broken bone and there was some records to show that x-ray and what that break might look like on x-ray, then you can x-ray the remains and match that with the individual's hospital records. In this case, many of these people had no hospital records, or they didn't know whose records to look up.
Dr. Dragan Primorac is on the staff of the University of Connecticut School of Medicine. He provided expertise in molecular biology and as a Croatian helped bridge the language barrier.
We had lucky, and through the AmeriCares, we were introduced to Perkin Elmer, the leading corporation with all this equipment necessary for our work, what we try to do.
So we were able to use DNA typing, and particularly the PCR-based DNA typing, to match the body's DNA type with that of potential parents to see whether or not these people were the offspring of the people that were worried about losing a son in the war.
So at the beginning of the project, we said, wow, it's going to take a couple of years because we don't have a laboratory. We have to establish a laboratory. And we developed all strategy.
The team set up the laboratory from scratch in less than 2 days. By the 3rd day of the 5-day trip, bone samples were prepared and they were ready to extract DNA.
Understanding that the technology to start brand new takes some time, I had proposed that we try and match a couple bodies that we were fairly confident we had already identified by other means and see if the PCR data, basically reconfirmed information that we already perceived to be true.
A couple of days before that we came in the split, a couple of fishermen, they found bones. And we said, in this region, only 2 guys disappear, 2 boys, in the last 9 years. So let's try identify him and take as a control. Last day, 5th day, we get DNA for the child. And we did typing. We get DNA. And we call parents. Finally, when the parents came, we took a blood from parents here. And we get typing. It was child from the family. And we say, boy, everything worked. So let's go work with the soldiers.
In DNA typing, scientists attempt to match variations of the same gene. Sandra Sardelli of Norwalk's PCR Core Lab told us how this works.
Alleles are alternative forms of the same genes that may differ slightly from each other. So, for example, when a child is born, they get one set of genes from their mother and one set of genes from their father. And essentially what they do is they get one allele for a specific gene from a mother and the second allele for the same specific gene from their father. And we each have two alleles for a specific gene.
Mitch Kennedy gave me a first-hand explanation of the DNA extraction and amplification process.
Well, the first thing you'd have to do if you're a forensic scientist and you wanted to obtain a DNA type of a biological sample is extract the DNA from the sample itself. In the case of the bodies that we were typing in Croatia, we needed to extract DNA from bone. We also had a tooth, and we cut the tooth and we took the crown off the tooth and then pulverized the bottom part of the tooth. We then take both of those samples and we add chemicals to them that digest. It's an enzyme that would digest the hard bone and the hard tooth material. Then with a variety of other washes and chemical additions, we're able to separate the DNA molecules from the other molecules in the mix. That is then taken and added to a PCR reaction tube like what we provide with the microamp tubes. In the PCR reaction tube, we'd have the HLA, DQ alpha typing reagents. They add the DNA sample to the tube, and then all of that goes then into the thermocycler. After the researcher closes and tightens down the thermocycler cover, they'd go ahead and bring up the appropriate protocol and the program necessary to run that amplification reaction.
During this period, we made two separate trips. One was in March, and second one I just recently came back from Croatia. So during these two trips, we identified so far 5 soldiers. We identified them by using DQ alpha, and we confirmed them by using polymarker kit. My last trip, instead using standard methodology for genomic DNA extraction, we were using new products of the PCR. Mitch Kennedy from Perkin Elmer convinced me, and he was right. The new product Helix worked excellent.
2 forms of DNA extraction were used. They used a traditional phenylchloroform extraction method, and they also used a Helix extraction method. And the Helix extraction method is a resin-based extraction.
Apart from the technological challenges the team faced, they all agreed that the human element was the most difficult, that of dealing with the family members. Mitch relayed the sentiments of another member of the team, Dr. Michael Baden of the New York State Police.
I think Dr. Baden said it best when that, as a forensic scientist, he can't help the dead body. He can't help that person. And maybe the best thing we can do is just be able to positively confirm that fact to the family so they can go on with the healing process if they did find that it was one of their offspring that was killed. And from that standpoint, we feel like we're doing good work, but it's a difficult situation to be in.
One family from southern Bosnia, they lost a son. And we were sure that we identify him. But parents, on the beginning, parents didn't trust him. They didn't want trust, particularly because Serbs in this period of time, they ask money, and they're telling, if you're going to send money to us, your son is going to live. And in the same time, we know that he's dead. And these people, after 5 first days and after our second trip and during the whole work, accepted all the bodies. And they have funeral. And for them, stories ended. Of course, they have always thoughts about their children, but they're not anymore sending money to the Serbs because they're telling them your son is alive.
We can be proud of our company's involvement in helping those unfortunate families learn the truth and begin the healing process. In another event involving PCR, 2 California high school juniors have discovered which chromosomes 3 cancer-related genes belong to. This may help scientists in the search for a cancer cure. The students may be the youngest researchers working on the Human Genome Project, and they made their discovery by copying strands of DNA with a thermal cycler donated by Perkin Elmer. Once published, their research will be available to scientists around the world on the internet. And in August, our own scientists met in Wilton, Connecticut to chart the course of Perkin Elmer's research initiatives through the 90s and beyond.
One of the challenges from an ABD perspective is in fact finding out what is going on elsewhere in the world within the context of R&D at PE, and either integrating that in part to some of our programs, or alternatively some of the other sites integrating some of the R&D that's being done in Foster City into their programs, whether they be here in Connecticut or in Europe for that matter.
And certainly all the other people here bring in their ideas, and taking home their ideas, of course, can have a very positive influence on my thinking.
Well, I think that it's very important in a fast-moving market environment like Perkin Elmer deals in, that we're constantly revisiting our priorities and setting long-term goals and visions.
We formed the Research Council just about a year ago, and the idea was to coordinate the research activities amongst the various sites at Perkin Elmer. You know, we do research in California at Foster City, at Applied Biosystems, at PE Nelson in San Jose, of course here in Connecticut, Beaconsfield, England at PE Limited, and at Bonesley Work in Uberlingen.
The challenge we face is how to allocate our research resources most effectively. I think the days of huge central research groups at large companies, the Bell Labs model, the IBM research model, those days are waning. And certainly a company like Perkin Elmer cannot afford an enormous blue sky research operation with hundreds and hundreds of white-coated scientists running around.
Perkin Elmer's history is one where we work very well with outside people who really discover or invent the technology. And I think our expertise is bringing it in-house and manufacturing it in a high-quality product and distributing it on a worldwide basis. So our key challenge is filtering through thousands of inputs that come in and trying to figure out which ones have the best opportunity for Perkin Elmer in the strategic directions that we're going.
One area that the Council is aggressively looking at is government funding opportunities, which in turn can encourage partnering with other companies.
There's currently a lot of initiatives on the part of the administration to make research dollars available to U.S. industries, for example, to pursue new commercial opportunities.
We've partnered with Dow in putting together a joint proposal whereby we would work with Dow scientists to advance the area of instrument calibration. In just May, we were awarded a patent on a technique we call AVI, Absolute Virtual Instrument. It's a mathematical technique to help people calibrate their instruments. We actually have incorporated this technique in the Pioneer, the near-infrared online instrument used in the Real-Time Systems Division.
In fact, that technology played a key role in winning a $1.7 million order from Lyondell Citgo Petroleum. Also on the Council's agenda is information technology, accessing the technical databases that are available on the information highway.
It's already begun to some extent. There is already, of course, very widespread email access to the network around the company, to the internet. And that's being widely used already, and it's very effective for transmitting information back and forth between our various sites and various collaborators in universities and other companies and so on.
Exploring future technologies and market opportunities is a key activity of the Council.
We looked at 4 or 5 major areas. As an example, one of those is biosensors. Biosensors have a real opportunity to replace some of our existing analytical instrumentation. Biosensors being very small could open up some opportunities for bioinstrumentation in the remote field applications. Another example is diode lasers. Diode lasers has the opportunity to make our instruments much smaller. They can actually become portable, and so people can take the instruments out into the field. And we see that as a long-term trend, more and more analytical chemistry being done outside of the traditional laboratory. So I think particularly in the area of miniaturization and sensors and helping pharmaceutical companies find faster and more efficient ways to develop drugs, the Research Council will help bring these technologies into the company.
In June, Dr. Carolyn Slayman of Yale University was elected to the Perkin Elmer Board of Directors. Dr. Slayman is the first woman to be elected to the 11-member board. Her background in molecular biology and genetics, along with a distinguished career in academia, will be an asset to our board. A major factor in Perkin Elmer's growth has been our joining forces with other companies, allowing us to enter new markets and acquire new technologies quickly. This calls for some new concepts in presenting Perkin Elmer to our customers and prospects, as Susan Keese explains.
If you look at a laboratory that is really heavily involved in the life sciences, or bioresearch as we call it, that laboratory may have a number of products from our company in their lab. They may have a Perkin Elmer DNA thermal cycler. On the next lab bench there may be a Perkin Elmer UV-Vis spectrometer or a fluorescence spectrometer. On the next lab bench may be a DNA sequencer that says Applied Biosystems, or a DNA synthesizer that says Applied Biosystems. On another bench there could be an HPLC system that says Perkin Elmer, but it's linked to a workstation for Turbochrome, which is P.E. Nelson. And then down the hallway there could be an LCMS system that says P.E. SciEx. We're asking our customers to acknowledge 4 company names rather than 1. What we have identified as a goal for the corporation is really to present Perkin Elmer in a cohesive, unified, sophisticated way, and to have all divisions represent themselves under the Perkin Elmer name and logo. A way to present your company in a more cohesive way is to have all your marketing materials look like they come from the same company. So what we're doing is we're working on guidelines. We've been working with the people overseas in Germany and in England and the groups out in Foster City to try to establish guidelines to help Perkin Elmer present themselves in a more compatible, unified way.
An obvious result of the corporate identity program can be seen in front of our buildings.
So the benefit of this program is to bring together our products and our company under one name. And hopefully someday when you do walk into a life science laboratory, the company name on the product will be Perkin Elmer, regardless of whether it's a DNA sequencer, an LC, a CE, a UV, or an LCMS system. So that's the real benefit and what we stand to gain as a company.
By the way, starting with Elasted Focus, we've changed our look and our packaging from plastic jackets to cardboard sleeves designed by our data services department. In addition to being more environmentally friendly, we're saving about 1/3 in packaging and shipping costs. As part of our ongoing communication program, we recently began publishing a book of print news clips relating to Perkin Elmer over a 3-month period. The book includes national, international, local, and selected trade journal clippings. It's available in libraries and lobbies throughout the corporation. Earlier this year, Perkin Elmer announced a new benefit in the form of an adoption assistance program. This new benefit will provide a $5,000 reimbursement to any employee who adopts a child. Irene Seifer of Human Resources told us how the program got started.
It's something that we gave a great deal of thought about for several years, but it wasn't until this past fall when one of our employees went to senior management, an employee who was interested in adopting a child, and asked what the benefits were and whether we could, if possible, do something about expanding the benefits to help to defray some of the costs of the adoption. And senior management thought about it and said, hey, this is a great next step in terms of our foster care program. And within the next 2 months, we established a policy and developed the program.
Joe, a Perkin Elmer employee, and his wife Diane were working toward an adoption when they found out about the new assistance program.
International adoption is going to range anywhere from $12,000 to $30,000. So there's a lot of expenses there in terms of just in the States and then when you get overseas. And one of the things that what they ask you to do, it makes a lot of sense, is to give a generous donation to the orphanage. And that's all part of the cost and stuff involved. So.
and let alone the other expenses you have, like as every new parent has, in trying to get the room ready and clothing and all the other expenses that you incur. So it gets to be a very expensive process.
What essentially happens is that when a family has finalized their adoption, they have their children, they're doing their legal paperwork. Once the paperwork is completed, they bring that to the Human Resources Department. We review the paperwork to ensure that everything is legally in order, and then we issue a check to them.
Joe and Diane adopted a brother and sister from Lithuania. Although there were cultural and language differences, not to mention moving from an orphanage to an American family, the children found a good way to start things off.
Well, when we first met them, they each had a long stem rose, and it was Mommy and Daddy, and they ran to us with open arms, and it was just wonderful. Couldn't have been better.
Yeah, they must have been either well prepared at the nursery, at the orphanage, because they just called us Tevas and Mamuta from the beginning, and that was kind of nice. Tevas and Mamuta means father and mother in Lithuanian.
And the first time we found out that the orphanage had hot water only 20 minutes a day. So the first time we had to give them a bath, they just were frightened to death. They thought it was ice cold. And we ran their hands under the water. They thought it was water from heaven, and they were shouting, "Shilta, shilta," warm water. So, well, they liked the mall, and the first time we took them food shopping, and we took them each in a cart, because their appetites got more finicky. They're asking for blinis, which is a Lithuanian dish. So we thought we'd take them food shopping and let them point out what they wanted. And they just hated to leave. It's air conditioned, all these colors and beautiful boxes and things like they've never seen before.
And they were crying.
Yeah, they hated to leave the Grand Union.
A big plus for Joe and Diane was learning the children's language.
We certainly can't speak Lithuanian, perfectly, that's for sure. And we can just barely get by. But we spent about, 3 or 4 months. We got a book and we got some tapes, and what we did was we used some sound equipment, dubbed the English, and then played the Lithuanian. So when we're driving in our cars and stuff, because we both commute and drive a lot, we could hear the words. And it helped a lot.
Well, we're extremely excited because we really think that the adoption program is a natural outgrowth of Perkin Elmer's involvement over the last year or two in the foster care program. There are many children out there who need homes, some on a temporary basis, some on a permanent basis.
Adoption is tough also just from almost like a psychological point of view. And it's really nice to know that it's almost like you have somebody backing you and supporting you, and it's nice the company recognizes that.
You get a real warm feeling because you see a child that really needs the care, and you see a family that really wants the child. And I think it's a wonderful blend of the two.
That's our show. I hope you enjoyed it. This is Carol Blazinski for In Focus.